So let's talk a little bit about what it was and what it is in terms of the assessments and how much different things are from a director assessment level.
Certainly. Well, look, Governance Evaluator, the way that you evaluated yourself or assessed yourself is really simple. And I love how Wes has captured this. He said it's really like marking your own homework. It's like, this is the topic. Please tell me how great or not great you think you are. It was very one-dimensional. It certainly served a great purpose. Yep. It's led us to where we are now.
And obviously a lot of competing platforms are still that, where
yes.
you've invested and changed and moved up. But we start to look at the smart way of doing it. And we're going to unpack that right now. Let's talk to the assessment stage for directors, whether it's, board evaluation or individuals, but we're really transforming, a director from I don't know what I don't know to I now know what I don't know. Let's dive into the process and how that data comes about, because that's going to be critical in about 20 minutes when we reveal the data.
So basically with GovernWith Plus, the product that we're talking about today is, of course, the Director Review and Development Program. Alongside, we also have the other product, which is the Board Governance Review. But this new version of this product is really smart, because what it does as a director, even though it might take you an hour to do this questionnaire, the results are worth it. We use a new triangulated way of questioning and building an algorithm around the areas that you need to know what your level of capability is. No longer is it subjective in that you just assess yourself. It's actually objective. And that leads you to be able to understand what is your level of capability. It's not a test. It's not a right or wrong. It's actually what is your level of capability. And it's either foundation, proficient, or advanced, which is incredibly helpful for a myriad of reasons.
So a lot of this input's getting triangulated, as we call it, against skills, experience, and qualifications.
Yeah.
Every time people use it, because it is an algorithm feed, it's constantly improving.
Yes, it's building its own insights.
So every time a director does a survey, this algorithm's getting stronger.
Exactly.
Which is really important to know if we're getting less subjective data compared to the old simple way. And now this is constantly moving forward. I hope that makes sense. Thumbs up in the chat if that makes sense.
Yes.
Otherwise, we look forward to some questions to clarify. We haven't done our job correctly. If not, so any feedback, welcome. Why is it so important to transform from I don't know what I don't know to I now know what I don't know?
Well, Wes, I think that question is one of the most significant things I learned right back in 2017, when back in those days when we were doing evaluation, we were just asking directors about corporate governance.
Right.
We weren't asking them about their sector-specific skills. And a classic example happened in a rural hospital where the directors didn't know what they didn't know. They didn't know to ask questions about the clinical governance processes that were happening in their service. And as a consequence, on their watch, tragically, they didn't notice a pattern of stillbirths in amongst their population, in amongst their community, in their maternity ward. And fast track forward, it caused such tragedy. The directors were actually dismissed. It absolutely destroyed the staff, the families, the community. And
obviously the parents.
Yes, and that board back then had done our questionnaire and had marked themselves all green.
Right.
But in fairness to them, they did not know what they didn't know. And the questions that we only asked boards in those days was just about corporate governance responsibilities, not about all the other things.
And that board had a typical composition, lawyers, accountants, community leaders, etc. Would that sound correct?
Yes, exactly. So not knowing what you don't know is destructive for both stakeholders and shareholders.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the industry response, the government response, your involvement with that response,
yes,
and what's transpired since then.
So, of course, a fabulous report and fabulous advice written by Stephen Duckett, Targeting Zero. And I myself, in partnership with the Victorian Healthcare Association, along with the Australian Commission on Safety, Quality and Healthcare, and also Safer Care Victoria, we actually responded. We stopped our survey across the health sector, and we actually responded by creating a whole new module, which was all about sector-specific responsibilities in health, and asking directors, how are you going to your clinical governance responsibilities? And that mirrored the Safer Care Victoria clinical governance framework. This, of course, was the beginning of our understanding that you actually need to be asked questions about your broader requirements than just governance. It's actually sector specific as well. And that actually assisted directors to start knowing what were the things they needed to ask about that they didn't know before. So it was a massive time in our life. It took about 8 months to build this module.
Wow.
Because it was very complex.
So you're saying that it was the catalyst for the transition from governance evaluator to GovernWith Plus?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It was the transition. It was a pretty big
Yeah.
episode in all of our lives.
Yeah, well, congratulations for doing that. Now, Sophie, just to recap, you've now got sector-specific modules in healthcare, health services, aged care,
human services, education, across a myriad of sectors.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, so that's the backstory and the reason why we've come to where we are. And if we start to look at the data and how it's smarter data, it's triangulated data, and it's constantly improving, that better data is going to give us better insights.
It does.
And of course, what's going to happen, Fee?
It is going to actually help us
make
have
better decisions.
Yes, make better decisions, exactly, which we actually don't take lightly. Like moving from I don't know what I don't know to knowing what I don't know creates anxiety, but a positive anxiety inside us.
A directed anxiety. Yeah. So if we start to think about to improve director capabilities now, the next phase is to have targeted action plans.
Exactly.
So let's talk about director capability development or targeted action plans based off this better data and transitioning the director from I now know what I don't know. Let's walk through this slide, through the director development cycle to where we get to that high functioning state.
Well, I think the biggest change of all that's occurred towards supporting the building of director capability is that when you actually do a questionnaire about your own capabilities that isn't subjective, and none of us mean to believe that we're legends in our own lunchtime, but we accidentally do. Once you actually fill out a questionnaire that enables you to look at your skills, your qualifications and your experience and have a true idea of your capabilities, you actually then are much better equipped to build your own action plan. To start actually really looking for what we call targeted education. And of course, we're really lucky with our partners. Governance Institute provides that targeted education in the health sector. It's the Victorian Health Association, Women on Boards, and so on. But it really does enable you to build your capabilities better.
Absolutely.
And one of the secrets, Wes, is that we've discovered is that your qualifications and your experience are not something that we're probably going to change when you're on a board, but your understanding of a particular subject, particularly if it's a risk relevant to your sector, is much more likely to increase if you understand that you don't have that understanding.
Absolutely. And it's not the role of the director to come to the board with answers, is it? It's just knowing that there's a lot of questions to be asked and to find out those answers. I hope this slide makes sense. There's a lot going on here. Happy to get a thumbs up if it's making sense. Obviously, every time we do targeted education, you're going to learn more and uncover your own unique insights. And that's when you can update your own development plan and then constantly improve in this directed development cycle. So with these new capabilities, you are now becoming high functioning, and that's what we want: high functioning boards, high functioning directors. But when we start to talk about the opportunities, we're also got to talk about our obligations fee. You know, we are sitting on boards. It's not all roses all the time. Let's talk to sector specific before we talk about community.
Yes, well, as I said to you way back in 2017, the biggest thing we all learnt together was that absolute necessity to you cannot just focus on your corporate governance responsibilities. You need to look at what your sector-specific responsibilities are. And governments, state, federal, they actually have really clear legislation that we need to follow. And we cannot say we don't know it. We actually have to, we had to do something about it. So our programs are constantly updated to match them.
Yeah, so we've always got to be informed, relevant, and current on all the topical issues of the day, as well as regulations. Okay. And if we look at community obligations, when we're talking outside of sector specific in particular, things change and evolve, changing priorities, expectations of all stakeholders. And we talk about, you know, social license, workplace, environment, etc.
I think this is, you know, like, okay, you want to meet your obligations to tick a box. But what really matters is your purpose and your values. And this talks to that. And this is, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, Wes, but this is the big one. And this points to the skills that we've identified that we need to build our capabilities in. This points to organisations living their purpose and their values and truly making their communities more successful accordingly. Yeah,
when I think about it, this is probably one of the most important slides of this whole presentation. You'll see why as we close the loop, as we move through. Now, this is actually why everyone's here. So thank you everyone for attending, and which is fantastic. People want to dive into the numbers you've got, the context of the numbers, how we've got them, why we've got them, and how it evolved. So Fee, we're going to dive into the capability gaps, but I think we're going to do something different to start with. We're going to look at the capability strengths. So that's a little bit of fun. But before we do, this is where the data came from.
Yes, well, as we've talked about, our triangulated smart data, it's not subjective data. We have, with the new GovernWith Plus program, we have actually had over 300 directors involved in our program already. So their feedback is being absolutely crucial for what our highlights are today. And we're predominantly been working with GovernWith Plus in the health kind of arena, aged care, human services and education so far. So I think it's relevant to everyone what we've found.
Absolutely. So one of the big differences from Governance Evaluated to GovernWith Plus is that you've now added contemporary skills into it, and this is part of the assessment, which many of the audience may not be aware of, but this is fundamental to professional and contemporary skills development and capability development.
Well, I think this is really important what Wes brings up. So in 2019, following our complete rebuild of the portal and with all those wonderful partners, the rebuild of the module around sector-specific information, we then in 2019 built the first skills matrix that not only covered professional skills, but it covered our sector-specific skills as well. Since then, we've actually discovered, and we've put this into GovernWith Plus, that just professional skills, the usuals, is not enough. Just sector skills is not enough. You need to have contemporary skills on your board. You need a makeup of those three things and other things. And that is really starting to create and highlight a balance of the right knowledge and capabilities on our board.
Come on, Fee, let's not hold them out now, but we've got the data coming up. So let's look at the strongest capabilities. Let's work through this chart, because these are the strengths, and there'll be a lot of questions. Put them in the chat if you have them. We'll certainly address them. But let's work from left to right, Fee, top to bottom, and what this means.
I find this fascinating, everybody, and I'm sure you will too, because for the last 5 years, our top risk that directors say we don't do this very well in the other evaluation, which is the board governance, is stakeholder engagement. And yet the number one capability across all of our triangulated evaluations so far, or assessments, is the top one is stakeholder engagement, which gives me great faith in the fact that you can all create great stakeholder engagement plans. Risk management is number 2. Corporate governance is number 3. But just have a look at the scores, everybody. It's 51.343% out of 100.
Well, Fee, let's talk about that. Out of 100 of what?
But look at community member. That's
it's actually below 50%.
50,
yeah, but 50% of what?
Okay. So
we've got a little highlight there.
So it's 50%, everybody, out of 100, or it's relevant to our matrix, which is part of our triangulation process of what we call effective practice.
Yeah, or the govern with effective. But a lot of people go, what is that? I don't understand it. You know, is it something made up? So let's just unpack that right now. And there's 2 levels. There's what the government would describe as effective practice.
Absolutely.
Certainly the health department, they talk in the language of director capability being foundational, proficient, advanced, a minimum standard of 50%. And you can see the scale there. But we find that it's not enough in our ability to benchmark the quality of director capability. So if we unpack what govern with effective practice standard means, this is what it's all about, Fee.
Yes, so the capability measurement is important, but so too are the governance standards that we live under. It needs to be reflective of ASIC 2019, beautifully new governance principles. The Australian Institute of Company Directors, of course, and all their amazing work, and the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profit Commission. It's really important that effective practice reflects those. Last but not least, as I said to you at the beginning, we're 10 years in 2 months. So we have 10 years of data. It's extraordinary. And it relates to well over 600 board evaluation contributions and well over 6,000 directors. And from that, we have extraordinary insights in AI.
So to summarise, you know, we're working with government standards, industry standards, as well as our own data. And that's why we can get a higher, more granular approach to these numbers.
It really helps people know who they really are without being too subjective.
Absolutely. Well, let's look at the biggest capability gaps on Australian boards as they sit in our data today, Fee. Let's work from top to bottom and then unpack why we're highlighting columns in orange.
Absolutely. So look, I'm actually thinking probably no one will be surprised, but it is incredible how the data really highlights this. So the first one, of course, the one with the lowest score is around ICT strategy and governance, or in other words, cyber. And that's huge at the moment. And that is one of our new contemporary skills questions. And the impact that that has on an organisation from a board knowing what questions to ask is high.
Yeah, incredibly high. But look how low it is at 27.5%.
Yeah.
That's extraordinary for something that's got such a high impact.
Correct. Data analysis, that's really helpful to know how to do that. But the impact overall on your organisation is not as much as, say, ICT. Safety, culture, essential. They have a high impact not having those skills. But the big kahuna is ESG. Environmental, social governance.
Now, Fee, a lot of people have got their own views or understanding of what ESG means. In your opinion, can we just unpack that for a second so we're all on the same page?
Well, it is really interesting and incredibly topical at the moment. ESG stands for environmental, social governance, but it's not just about climate change, everybody. It's so much bigger than that. One of the reasons I think from my reading lately that everyone jumps to think it's about climate change is that's an easy one to measure. But in actual fact, it's about social impact as well. And governance is the glue that binds all those things together. And the social or societal issues are difficult, and they're difficult to talk about and they're difficult to grapple with. But in no way, shape or form should that prevent us from stepping back from them.
Right.
So that's why this is so important. And whilst it's 39%, it actually, I would argue, has the biggest impact.
Well, when you look at it, what's going to, out of all these 5, what's going to disproportionately negatively impact?
Yeah.
And I think we know the answer to that is those 2. We've got a lot of case studies up in a couple of minutes about this, and we'll unpack that right now. But these 2 are the big ones, aren't they?
Yeah. Look, they really are. And just to support this, we also looked at the data from the board governance evaluation assessments as well. And the number 1 area that directors, it's actually gone past stakeholder engagement. The number 1 area that directors now say, we actually don't necessarily do this as well as we could. In fact, we're at that stage where we don't even know what we necessarily should be doing about it. So that's why it's so impactful.
ICT?
Well, ICT or cyber probably, security right now, which is the governance piece.
Information communications technology.
Absolutely, yeah.
I hope that helps, Kathy. Thank you for your question. Let's move along because I'm mindful of time. What are these 2 big things that can disproportionately impact?
I think the number 1 issue that directors talk to us about, that it impacts on their ability or their confidence to ask the right questions. And I think that's one of our key jobs as a director, is to ask the right question, to ask, well-formulated strategic questions.
So if you don't know what you don't know, there's no way of asking a question, even if you've got no knowledge on the topic.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the sort of questions that we need to be asking at a board is about behaviours, our organisation's behaviours. What are we actually doing?
Yep.
How are we doing things? What are the decisions we're making as an organisation? Do we have policies and procedures in place and systems to address these things?
So you don't need to be a guru around ICT to be able to ask the question, do we have systems and policies in place?
As we talked about before, it's about building your understanding of these top risks, not necessarily going out and completely retraining from an accountant to a meteorologist or something.
Okay, my favourite slide. Okay, the impact of not knowing, Fee. Let's walk through that from top to bottom, left to right.
That's true. Boards cannot address the associated ESG and ICT risks, because these directly, getting this wrong or not knowing how to have the discussions at the boardroom table ultimately leads to organisational reputation issues, inability to attract and retain workforce, and this is absolutely true, organisational culture, and destruction of shareholder value, or, in other words, loss of money, loss of profit.
Absolutely.
Money isn't everything, but it comes a close second to oxygen.
It comes very, very close.
Yeah.
And I think if you end up being in Australia's number 1 satirical website, you're hitting a new low. It's tough. And there it is, the Batuta Advocate. That's showing how far organisational reputation has collapsed for Medibank board.
Yeah,
and
really
just
tough.
I'm shocked every day I wake up, just more bleeding from this ICT incident. So incredible. So let's talk about some contemporary examples, because I did promise that we'd work through a couple on the email promoting the webinar. Let's talk about each one of these logos, and people will be familiar with it, but we also want to get your take on it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think we'll talk more about Rio Tinto in a moment, in the next slide. But it's absolutely tragic, because their CEO had to leave, reputation damaged, communities negatively impact. But I guess the discussion about Netball Australia is absolutely fascinating, because one of the most important things that we've recognised nowadays, and why it's so important to have ESG skills, is because the thing that we need to be moving towards is a harmony between shareholder and stakeholder focus.
Yep.
And if we don't discuss societal issues and what may be a societal issue at the boardroom table before it becomes one. And like in Netball Australia, it's then spoken about to the world by the actual stakeholder, by the member of the team or the staff member. You actually run the risk of disenfranchising both your stakeholder, who are your staff,
which
and
is
your
what happened.
shareholder.
Which is what happened.
Exactly what happened. Because so I'm not in the business of saying who was right and who was wrong. I'm in the business of saying the process that has led to this is entirely wrong.
So to summarise, you'd be saying that the board failed in their duty to ask questions
About this.
about a sponsorship proposal.
Yeah.
They failed to ask their players how they felt about it and bring in all their stakeholders. And like you say, it's not a judgment or a decision, it's just a process.
And unfortunately, they are a really good example of the person who was, or the organisation who was delivering the money is now disenfranchised and not going to do it, and the players are disenfranchised, and the public is looking on confused.
Yeah.
So what that underpins, everybody, as a real lesson to us all is that one of the biggest crimes we can commit in an organisation when it comes to environmental social governance is hypocrisy. Because quite often our staff or those who are engaged with us, or what we call our stakeholders, love us for our purpose and our values. And if we are to talk about social or societal issues, we need to be very clear and very sure that they match our purpose and values, and that we're not being hypocritical. In other words, we've attracted all these great people because of what we say we believe in, but when push comes to shove, or we've really got a magnifying glass on us, we fail.
So it's not just about the customers. It's about employees, it's the community members,
everybody,
the whole wagon wheel of stakeholders.
Correct.
Okay.
And our data and our talking to our directors has led us to this knowledge.
Right.
It's really interesting.
And of course, Optus is probably in the same camp, just not hurting as bad. But I tell you what, they'd be right up there with Medicare in terms of the impact on their customer base, not deleting customer data after 6 months, you know, all these sort of horrific things. You know, it's just not meeting up to your community standards or those evolving standards that we spoke about earlier in your community obligations.
And look, my observation is, and I've seen this happen with even some of our health services and what have you in Victoria and around Australia, is that at our peril do we not take ICT seriously or cyber security seriously, because it does end up costing us money, whether it's paying a fine, whether it's reputation or whatever. And unfortunately for Medibank, it's just the whole catastrophe.
Well, the cost of deterrence is tiny compared to the cost of repair.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it comes back to knowing the right questions to ask and having those discussions at the board before it goes out.
Great. Well, let's unpack Rio Tinto, because there's an incredible article on Saturday's Age, which Fee nearly choked on her coffee when she saw it turning up in time for today's thing. But that was a deep dive in a lot of areas, Fee, and there were some quotes by Simon McEwen. But let's, hat tip to Simone Fox-Coob for publishing and writing the article in the first place. But let's just quickly walk through this.
It just speaks to how topical this is and how well we need to all take time to think about it. So I guess this is a really good example of all of the consequences that we've talked about, not having these capabilities at the boardroom table and having these discussions. I thought it was absolutely fascinating to see that a previous director, Simon, had actually mentioned that when he actually spoke to one of his staff, they no longer, once the two ancient rock shelters were destroyed, they no longer proudly ran around in their Rio Tinto.
Yeah. Well, that's organisational reputation, that's ability to maintain a
kind of says it all, doesn't it?
It sums it up in that one statement. And so if this message is not coming through via the data, it's certainly in the media, and that's probably the last place you'd want to end up, I'd say.
So I also saw the workforce tragedy in that, so often really good people in high places take the hit when something bad happens.
Yeah.
And so I guess our really strong message is that we need to understand our level of capabilities around the ability to have these discussions.
Yeah.
And we then need to work on the understand bit of building our capabilities. And we need to try really hard to have these discussions at the boardroom table, trying not to be hypocritical about our purpose and values before one of our staff or one of our stakeholders has it for us. And that's not good.
No, absolutely not. Well, we've spoken about sort of the doom and gloom, but now let's talk about the opportunities that the data presents to us, especially for an aspiring director, who might be on the call today. Obviously, the proactive chair people that are on here today and the directors, whether they're sitting or aspirational or actually on the Governance Evaluator platform, there's a couple of little things we want to mention. First is the benchmark report. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's the summary of all our data at the end of the year. Why is it so important, Fee?
So our benchmark report is so important. It's what it does is it allows you to see where do you sit in relation to all the corporate governance requirements, but across all the sectors. It also allows you to see where do you sit compared to your own sector, compared to your peers.
Yeah. And this is all set against effective practice, that we govern with effective practice.
Yes, but also against your peers, and that's really helpful. Okay. The thing that I love the best about our benchmark report is it underpins some really important information for the rest of the year. So for example, we've already identified that ESG.
Yes.
And data or cybersecurity is
ICT.
a big one. So we'll be rolling out everybody lots of really good conversations each month about those and sharing with everybody what are our capable boards doing to address these things.
Absolutely.
And the benchmark is sort of the lead of that.
And of course, Bree will be hosting the 30-day challenge. We'll get onto that in a minute, but that's in partnership with the benchmark report and to help people get the data in and get new insights using new technology. We'll get to that in a minute. But if we look at the director opportunities, Fee, it's really getting quite obvious, isn't it, that to have new capabilities is the key to becoming a high-functioning director.
And it's okay. Like, I know as a director, quite a lot of us are really targeted for boards because we know about health or we're doctors, lawyers, or whatever. But it's okay from a contemporary perspective to discover that they are not necessarily a high area of understanding for us. And I think we all should welcome the opportunity to learn these things. But importantly, if this is something that you know a lot about, what a great opportunity for being on boards and bringing this capability to the board.
There's plenty of gaps there to fill at the moment. That's obvious. And, if we deep dive into what it can look like, if you haven't had the experience of our platform yet, this is the sort of granular detail that we go into and the insights that can be uncovered. It's pretty exciting, Fee. Look at the process to creating new opportunities for director capabilities.
No, I think that's really good. I think that, it's really interesting with all of our directors who've been using GovernWith Plus now. They get so excited when they see this actual diagram on their individual dashboard, and they all want to actually put it into their resume, because the reason we do this is for a positive reason. There's nothing better than understanding what are your top capabilities. What can you hit the road running with when you come to a board? Nothing better than your chair and your other directors knowing that.
Absolutely.
So that you can, immediately be in the place where you need to be to really bring some support.
Well, I'm thinking of the aspiring director who wants to get a directorship next year, Fee. If they had run through this data, they could present it to potential boards that they're applying for. They certainly differentiate themselves and have a clear roadmap to strengthening areas that are clearly underserved across our data's telling us.
Or if they discover that they haven't got those, they could do some immediate things.
Absolute capability
so
development.
that the next time they do it, they have a higher level of understanding.
Absolutely, especially if they were studying around ESG and
Mm.
ICT, as we've correctly identified. Now, for existing governance evaluator directors, you could be sitting on a board and not aware of the GovernWith platform. We would like to have you speak to us about a complimentary upgrade fee so that we can get people upgraded, getting those brand new assessments, most importantly, getting into the benchmark.
We're really passionate about everybody who hasn't been upgraded, who is a governance evaluator client already, and you haven't been upgraded to the new portal. Please reach out to us today. Bree, our amazing Bree, will support you and we will get you onto this amazing new portal. You're going to love it.
Absolutely. Now, if you're an aspiring director, this is really, really cool. We're now, for the first time ever, offering this to aspirational directors. Their company, their board, their organisation may not necessarily be with GovernWith, but we're opening up access to that. And Bree has
too many E's.
Put a link in here for anyone interested in it. We've just got a landing page. All you've got to do is fill out your details and we'll be in touch. But you have access to all the tools and the toys that everyone else gets. And
most importantly, you'll be able to go through that triangulated questionnaire, assess yourself and see your true level of capabilities, and also have access to that wonderful development plan.
Absolutely.
And to our amazing partners for the education.
Oh, yeah. So you can have targeted action plans and join in some of the webinars where we unpack insights and learn how to dive into that data and get more information out of that.
Exactly.
So if you need to sign up there, just nothing will happen today other than we know who you are and we can reach out and follow that up. If we look at the chairperson opportunities, I think this just sums up having what we're all about, isn't it? High functioning boards. We've been through the capability process, how the data works, but you know, for a chairperson, I'm not sure how many people have actually seen this slide before or been inside the GovernWith Plus platform.
Exactly. I think the most important thing that chairs tell us that they want is they are committed to supporting their board, even really high caliber boards, given that there is this whole new focus on contemporary skills, have an opportunity for growth. And chairs say to me that see that as their fundamental goal is to support and assist that. So I think being able to support the growth of your board's capability is a really wonderful opportunity for our chairs. And we've got a bit of a special offer for our chairs.
Absolutely. But just on this slide here, Fee, you know, for the untrained eye, we're looking at a terracotta board where it's terracotta or that orange. They're weaknesses that need to be dived in at an aggregate level of the board, isn't it? You know, so that way the board is weak as an aggregate in this capability, and we need action plans to support that to bring those colour schemes up and be less
and that
an issue.
Leads straight through to that development plan.
Yep.
And, you know, really easy to link to all the resources.
Absolutely. So if we talk about chairpersons that are on the governance evaluator, just like the directors, we'd welcome them for a complimentary upgrade to experience what it looks like. And obviously, Bree will have details there to reach out. Now, if you're a proactive chairperson whose organisation hasn't been involved with GovernWith or the governance evaluator as it formerly was known, we'd like to extend an offer to experience it for free. I think it's really, really wonderful for a chairperson to experience what it looked like as a director, to get understanding and the feel for it, how far we go with all this data and what it can look like for as it would be rolled out towards inside an organisation. What do you think of that?
I think it's a great idea. I think as a chair to actually just try, what is this assessment like? Yeah. And what do I get from the data, and what do I get from that development plan, and how does that look? So we're really excited to offer this opportunity. So please, Bree has actually put a little opportunity to
Yeah.
click and join there, and
Yeah.
then we can follow up and assist.
Absolutely. But I think it's also a great way for, chairs who are potentially looking at options just to see whether GovernWith Plus is a good fit for their organisation.
Absolutely.
Without having to spend any money,
Yeah.
out, risk anything at all. We want you to experience what it looks like. So if you click the link, all it is just a form. We're filling it in, and we'll get in touch and talk through what's best fit for your organisation. So let's quickly wrap up. We talk about benchmarking the 30-day challenge. You've already touched on the point that, you're actually putting your, if I was a chairperson, my team's data against GovernWith effective practice standards, but also you're getting benchmarked against similar organisations.
Yeah, your peers, and also the corporate governance responsibilities across all of our boards, which is fascinating.
Yeah,
absolutely fascinating.
And we've knocked together the 30-day challenge that Bree is leading next week with clients of ours that we have at the moment that need to get through their evaluations, want to get on the benchmark. And now we just wanted to offer it to everyone who's turned up today to make sure that they don't miss out as well, because this could be very helpful, as Fee said, throughout next year, knowing where you are and giving yourself some targets to actually
it's really interesting.
work towards.
No, it's really interesting because obviously the 2022 benchmark won't come out until 2023. That's how life works. But a lot of our boards love using this to support their strategic planning, which happens around March, stuff like that. So it does fit in well with that governance development plan.
Absolutely. And the good news is that we are going to shoehorn you into a couple of sessions to help people who've done their evaluations to interpret and get more out of their data, to make more sense and meaning, and start to create their own action plans, whether you're a chair or an individual aspirational director, to get the most out of this platform for you. So that's something that's normally a paid upgrade, but we're more than happy to share it because we really want you to experience what it's all about. So with regarding upgrading from governance evaluator to GovernWith Plus, whether you're a director or a chair, we need you to reach out to Bree Mahoney, our superstar customer success, right beside me over there, and her email's there, success@governwith.us. Ask her about the 30-day challenge. Ask about getting enrolled into GovernWith Plus. Contact Bree. She'll be doing demos and inductions next week as well. So that's super important. But this is the stage. We've timed it nicely with 10 minutes to go, Fee. If there are questions out there, we still have quite a few on the call today, which is fantastic. We would welcome any question whatsoever. We're not going anywhere till every question has been answered. It doesn't matter whether it's technical, it's simple,
anything,
dish it up, left field, it's from Mars, it doesn't matter. We'd welcome any questions. If you're not sure about how any of this work that we just went through and where you're at in your governance journey, in your development capability journey, just put it in the chat, let us know, and we'll do everything we can to help out. So let's start seeing some questions. Thank you, Kate Gardner.
Thanks, Kate.
Best wishes to you for the festive season as well. Hopefully we'll get some warm weather. Yeah, we've got Bree.
Oh, fare thee well, Kathy. Thank you. Bye.
Beautiful. What's that thing?
That's the difference.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So which type of education does GovernWith work with? That's a really, really good question from Belinda Howe.
Hello, Belinda. Thanks for asking that question. So we partner with the Governance Institute of Australia, and they do really broad education, which is why when in your action plans, depending on where your capabilities sit, it's really important to be able to go to a source that provides education that can meet that need, but with that proper governance overlay. We also partner with the Victorian Healthcare Association. They provide sector-specific training for those clinical, those health sector specific areas. And we also partner with Women on Boards. Women on Boards in particular are incredibly supportive and very helpful for those aspiring directors. They particularly support directors to build their resumes and those sorts of things, but they also run some fabulous programs about governance and also about ESG and all those topical sorts of things, as do our other providers as well. The other thing that's really important is there is an awful lot of really fabulous free information out there. The Department of Health, there's all sorts of information that's incredibly helpful and important, but we also provide lots of webinars and guest speaker discussions and those sorts of things as well. So Belinda, I hope that answered your questions, and please reach out to us if you want to know any more.
And also, we've got sector-specific new content coming through the pipeline next year. So obviously, you've got broad
around education,
yes,
more around health, human services, and of course, aged care. And we already have some fabulous aged care support information as well. Oh, thank you, Katrina. It was so lovely to have you here.
So good to see all these names.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
It's wonderful.
And Belinda, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Yes.
Now, there must be some more questions. We've got one very good question there. We're still available. There's still nearly 30-odd people on the call. Melanie may have a question. I'm not sure. But... there's some big plans, Fee, for 2023.
Yes.
Let's talk about that while people think of their questions.
I think probably the most important thing that Wes and I have discovered over the last 6 weeks, going through this data together, doing the deep dives and talking to people, not just the people doing the assessments, but also, industry experts.
Yep.
And what we really see ourselves as being able to do and incredibly supportive to you all is to really support with the information, the insights and the intel around ESG, and also lean on and talk to our experts around the cyber things. And we had some fabulous people who we can bring back again to support and talk to everyone. But we really have a passion and commitment to the ESG space.
Absolutely.
And we see that there's a lot we can do there, and we look forward to bringing you lots of insights. What do our top boards do every month? Because that will really help people.
Absolutely. But, just reflecting on this data here, these were the strengths.
Yeah,
and
isn't that interesting?
If you're looking for a directorship career or a second half of life career, look at corporate governance. It's barely above a pass standard. Now, just think about that. If you've done your own evaluation, you know where you're strong, you know where you could develop capabilities, and then use that information to be applying for new positions. Here's the data right here. It's telling us that the community is not strong in these areas that it should be foundational, really, like a pillar of corporate governance.
And it's interesting because also with corporate governance, I don't think people are as aware as they could be of the actual places that you can do fantastic governance courses. So, for example, whilst the AICD provide the best education, it's incredibly expensive. And so if you look at some of the Governance Institute courses, they are more affordable. And a lot of the reason why the outcome for governance is quite low is because not a lot of directors actually have governance qualifications. They have lots of understanding and experience and have done lots of PD, but around the actual qualifications.
Fee, we've got a question from Graham Dixon. It is, what does a typical governance development plan consist of?
Really, really good question. So at the moment, a typical governance development plan, I'm assuming do you mean for the board or an individual director? Why don't I go through both? So right now, a typical governance development plan for the board, the areas that are highlighted in the development plans the most often is having a stakeholder engagement plan, refreshing, sit down as a board and go, who are our stakeholders? And what is our communication and influence strategies with them? And is our board involved? What is what is our approach to ESG? And a lot of boards are starting with something simple as, well, what does it actually mean to us? What is the definition of those areas? And importantly, what is going on around our organisation or around our partners, and not going hell for leather on some whole new project when there's probably some fabulous things being done in your community. So under risk, ESG, under communication is stakeholder engagement. Boards are also typically saying we do actually need to focus more on our CEO review and support. We need to focus more on our induction program, our succession, and now we need to focus more on being strategic. It's time after COVID, we got out of the weeds and we actually stood up and started being more strategic. So as an individual director, a typical development plan that we're seeing at the moment, number one, is actually being going through a process that enables you in induction to become a lot more aware of the services your organisation provides, and that what are their top risks and how are these risks being managed. It's incredibly interesting, but a really key correlation that we're seeing is if you want your directors to be more strategic, for goodness sake, teach them more about the services you provide and the top risks, and then they will be more strategic in their questioning. Obviously, they're wanting to do ESG. They're wanting to learn what does that actually mean, and what does our organisation do around that area, and what are the questions I need to ask as a director? How do I build my understanding?
Great.
So
now, Dennis O'Neill's written in with the questions.
Dennis.
What does this data say about the challenge of increasing time commitments by directors and ultimately what they're paid, especially on public sector boards?
Yeah, exactly. Such a good question. Another part of our questionnaire that we haven't talked about today is that we actually ask directors, how much time do you have available for this exact for this role, and what is your leadership aspirations, and do you understand the amount of time that you need to commit? And it's absolutely fascinating. The data shows that professional directors, those who are paid, of course, naturally will make the time available. It's a really important question that you ask directors, because they, if there is such a thing as directors taking on too many governance roles and being on too many committees and so on. So we've just seen a really good example recently of a very high caliber director who sits on a few boards in their questionnaire answering that they had a small amount of time, but their skills are so valuable, they're going to become the chair of a very important subcommittee. So they're now going to change some of their other time commitments accordingly. So that is a brilliant question. And our data is showing that directors are really making big decisions about spending their time when they're on paid boards.
And I think also to that point, Fee, and to Dennis, great question, by the way, thank you.
Thank you, Dennis.
Is when the directors understand the impact of filling out their assessments, taking the time to consider. We're only talking an hour per, and there's only 2 assessments to do. So overall, the quality of what goes in is the quality of what goes out. But when people see the bigger picture and the why and the better insights and the better decisions, the pathway to a high-functioning board, we get a lot of buy-in, and it's fantastic. It's where boards, not necessarily they're seeing it as work and thinking it's just another task to put on, but we think we've really addressed some of those things. typically, compared to every other way of trying to attempt governance, this would be one of the faster ways to actually get to a high-functioning board. If that's your goal, and that's what we want to help facilitate, if you want that high-functioning status as a board as a whole, this would be the fastest way to do it. So we know time's hard. We've just had, I believe it was Jim Brooks here from Rochester. Life gets in the way. The health service was inundated. We understand it. So we're working hard to meet, directors where they're at. And we've got a lot more to say about that next year. So we're very committed to making sure, but this today is one of those reasons why sessions that you should encourage the team to do the assessments, take the time. It's not a survey anymore. It's a real thing. And of course, you're sitting on a board for obvious reasons. You've got obligations, let alone the carrot of how can I improve and become more capable.
So I guess in summary, our public sector boards really do understand the time commitment required. And the old-fashioned notion of, we don't have time, directly relates to the outcome being shivers. We should have taken more time because now we're in a mess.
It's an issue of priority.
So it's that emotional, intelligent view of let's really do this and do it well, and things will improve expendially.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, though, Graham. That was wonderful.
Yeah, it's a great question. We can answer that a bit more with more data.
Well, absolutely. And like I said, the data's constantly improving. So if you want to help improve the data and get better insights, certainly do it. There's some people still on the call. So if you've got questions, feel free. There's a great opportunity to pick Fee's brains, because her questions were starting to turn into a consult as opposed to just an explainer. So anyone out there's got some curly questions, you're more than welcome to put them up right now.
That's great. I guess the one thing, while I'm waiting for another question, I just wanted to finish by saying that the contemporary question around community member is really interesting, because it doesn't just ask you, are you a community member? It actually asks you, what part of the community do you represent? Do you represent the big or small groups in your community? And the feedback around that is absolutely fascinating.
Right.
And it helped explain why community member is so small. So we've got two things happening. We've got, and we'll have a whole session about this, but we've got people who are out of town bringing awesome skills to these boards. Inducting them about this session is really, really helpful. Inducting them about their community is helpful. But at the same time, understanding what part of your community someone on your board represents is equally important, and making them feel welcome and included, and moving things around to match their needs. And our questionnaire also identifies learning needs and behavioural needs, I think is crucial. So we look forward to helping everyone learn a bit more about that.
Absolutely.
Fabulous. Well, thank you. It's really lovely having you on board, Wes.
And
I know that everyone would have loved meeting you today.
Wow, it's great to be here.
You have brought a wealth of information and knowledge and help already, and helping us be clear about what we're doing is a gift that you bring. So I want to thank you, and I'm sure everyone will enjoy looking at this webinar again.
Absolutely. And always reach out for questions. Like I say, we're sincere in our offer for people that, especially chairs who haven't experienced what we're doing and more importantly, what we've done, because there will be some people that maybe signed up a couple of years ago and just don't know what's changed. And it's really impactful. The data's telling us what needs to happen. And if we're all committed to, a greater good and a greater service, the data's just providing that pathway.
That's lovely.
And it's such a good opportunity.
Thank you.
So thank you, everyone.
So thank you, and goodbye, everybody. It was lovely to see you all, and thank you so much for coming.
Bye for now.